Hello, I'm Minna Silberberg, and this module is a brief introduction to the purposes and types of evaluation. Before I start, I want to say that throughout these modules, for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to talk about program evaluation. However, most of what I'll be discussing is relevant for policy evaluation or evaluation of other types of interventions as well. When we set out to do anything in life, arguably our most important consideration should be our goal. We want to base our actions on what we are trying to accomplish. The same is true for developing an evaluation plan. An evaluation's purpose drives evaluation questions and methods and how the evaluation is carried out. People often think of the purpose of program evaluation as being deciding whether to continue or discontinue a program. They see evaluation as being a way of making a thumbs up or thumbs down decision. That can be the purpose of evaluation, but it is only one of a number of possibilities. In fact, making a thumbs up, thumbs down decision is not the purpose of most evaluation done in the real world. Here's a list of a number of common purposes for conducting evaluation. You might be deciding whether to continue or discontinue a program, thumbs up, thumbs down. But alternatively, you might just be tracking how well implementation of the program is going so that you can fix any glitches. For example, programs commonly experience delays. Some of these might seriously derail the work, so you'll want to be aware of delays and figure out what is causing them in order to keep the program running smoothly. Another purpose of evaluation might be to assess whether your program theory makes sense. Theory in this context means the assumptions about cause and effect that are behind program design. For example, the theory underlying a hypertension support group might be that peer support encourages health behavior change. The goal of your evaluation might be to assess whether that hoped-for behavior change is occurring. Assessment of this type could be consistent with the goal of deciding whether to continue or discontinue a program, but it's more likely that you'll do this assessment in order to figure out why behavior change is or isn't happening so that you can modify your program. Up to now, the audiences for the evaluation goals I've talked about have been those running the program. However, there are other audiences you may want your evaluation to speak to. For example, you may want to provide evidence of your program's successes in order to get more funding from a potential sponsor. That funding might be used to scale up successful program components or to replicate those successful components in other communities. You may also want to show positive results in order to strengthen the support of existing funders or collaborators, or to enhance support in the larger community. Finally, you may want to share your model or the lessons you've learned with others. This is not meant to be a comprehensive list of purposes, and these purposes are not mutually exclusive. You can design a single evaluation to achieve more than one of these goals. However, because your goals should inform your evaluation plan, you'll want to be wary of trying to do too many things at once. So in what ways do evaluation purposes affect evaluation planning and design? Well, let's take a couple of different purposes from this list and think about their implications. If, for example, the purpose of our evaluation is to track and improve implementation of our support group program, then we'll want to use our evaluation to answer questions like, are the support groups happening as frequently as expected? If not, why not? And because our purpose is to improve implementation, we'll want to be carrying this evaluation out all the way through the program. On the other hand, if our goal is just to learn lessons about the factors that affect implementation, we could do that at the end of the program looking back. Choosing another purpose, if we want to use evaluation to replicate successful program components in another context, we'll need an evaluation that not only tells us which program components were successful in achieving the hoped-for outcomes, but we'll also need to understand the characteristics of the program context that facilitated success. Clearly, purpose alone does not determine every aspect of your evaluation. In most cases, an evaluation question can be answered in more than one way. In choosing how you will answer the question, you'll need to take into account considerations like research ethics, the resources you have available, and so forth. However, purpose should be the most important driver of your evaluation. For example, the question of whether a program has achieved its goals might be answered very differently if your audience is a funder who cares about statistics than if your audience is consumers who care about the impact of your program on their daily lives. So purpose should drive the type of evaluation you do. There are a number of different ways we can think about types of evaluation. We talk in other modules about evaluation theories and evaluation designs. I want to end this module by talking about two very basic typologies of evaluation. The first typology rests on the question, are you evaluating the outcomes of your program or the process of your program? In other words, do you want to know what the program achieved or the process by which it was carried out? You can further complexify this idea, for example, by distinguishing short-term, medium-term, and long-term outcomes. For example, attitudinal or knowledge change being a short-term outcome, behavior change being a medium-term outcome, and change in health status being a long-term outcome. But the two basic categories for this typology are process evaluation and outcome evaluation. The second typology rests on a different question. Is evaluation being done to tell the final story or to tweak the program as you go along? The primary categories of evaluation for this typology have historically been summative evaluation, in which you're telling or summing up the final story, and formative evaluation, using evaluation to tweak or form your program. One analogy that has been made to this typology is the distinction between what the chef does when he's making soup and what the food critic does when she tastes the soup. The chef starts with a recipe but tastes as he goes along and adds a little of this and that based on that tasting. So that tasting is formative evaluation. The critic tastes the soup to make final judgment on it. That tasting is summative evaluation. Often people assume that summative evaluation is about outcomes and formative evaluation is about process, but that need not be the case. Thinking again about our hypertension support groups, you can see that we might be asking process questions as we go along to tweak our program. Or we might be asking those questions at the end in a summative way to draw conclusions or learn lessons about the process. Similarly, we might ask our outcome questions at the end as part of a summative evaluation, but we might also look at preliminary outcomes as we go along in order to modify the program if hoped-for outcomes are not being achieved. I said before that historically the evaluation field has juxtaposed summative and formative evaluation. In the last couple of decades, a third category has been added to this evaluation typology, that of developmental evaluation. The concept behind developmental evaluation is that often we're trying to do something a lot harder than making soup or providing peer support. To take an extreme, we might, for example, be trying to figure out how to eradicate poverty in our community or undo institutional racism. We don't have a recipe or a curriculum for doing those things, and the results depend on a complex interaction among many different factors. We can't predict all the results of all the choices we make. We just have to get in there and do the best we can every day. In that circumstance, we evaluate not just to make little tweaks to our program, but to make big decisions about what we're doing. We might lay down some basic principles and experiment with radically different ways of operationalizing them, or we might even scrap some of those principles and start over. This is the circumstance that some people describe as building the plane while we're flying it. And it requires ongoing evaluation and reevaluation as an integral part of building that brand new plane that's like nothing you've ever made before. Another module in this course addresses this idea of developmental evaluation in depth. I hope this module has demystified some of the jargon of evaluation for you and also gotten you thinking about a variety of ways in which evaluation can be used in your work.